Okay, welcome to our February 19th meeting of the DRB. We have a non-PRC application before us for information only. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm Scott Adams. I'm a land use attorney with McGuire Woods, and I appreciate you having us here tonight before the snowpocalypse happens. And we are pleased to be here, and thank you for making the time for us to come and do this presentation on our project for Faraday Park East, formerly known as 11111 Sunset Hills. Joined tonight by our design team from NB&A and also our landscape architect from Urban, and happy to talk about the Faraday Park East project. Faraday Park East is part of a larger redevelopment that was approved last year by the Board of Supervisors. It includes an existing office building that is remaining on the property, a future phase that will be developed for either a hotel, senior housing, or another office building. And then it also includes a residential portion, which is what we're going to be focused on tonight, which includes a multifamily building and then also townhouses and open space. As part of the review for this project and going through the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee, they had suggested coming to this group to give an informational presentation, which we were happy to accept their invitation to do so. And so we're here tonight to, again, run through the design on multifamily, the townhouses. And also, I think what you'll notice in the image that's on the screen, there's another project that is next door to this, that is the other half of Faraday Park West, which is also being developed by our client, Rooney Properties, and was designed to be compatible and coordinated with this project in both the way the access works, the design of the projects, and also the open space. That one's not the focus of this presentation, but you're going to see a lot of coordinated development between those two, and so just wanted to make you aware of that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our design team to run through the project, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening. Good to see you all. I'm Jack Holland. I'm principal at MV&A Architects. Our firm has been lucky enough to be working on this project since early January of 2015. It's been a kind of a complicated project. As Scott alluded to, it's really happened in two separate phases for us. We first started with and then I'll just give you, I think some background will help you understand where we are. As Scott mentioned, let me just go back to thank you. In the foreground is the project, the red brick building is the project we're here to focus on this evening, Faraday East. In the background, you can see a pair of, in sort of the orange color brick, those are a pair of sticks of townhouses that are also part of the project. And then beyond that is the first project we began working on, Faraday Park West. That's at, what is it? It's 1831 Michael Faraday Drive is the address for that. As the projects evolved, we started on the West project back in 15, doing the planning, working with all the different consultants and staff to begin to work through the road systems and all the different pieces of the project that needed to come together to make it work. As we were working on that project, our client became aware that there was property available for them on the 11111 Sunset Hills property that they could negotiate and they could buy and they could expand their project. Originally, it was thought that there was enough lag between the two that they would be two separate projects and they would come online at different times. But as the project evolved, it became clearer and clearer that it would probably be easier and better from all reasons to bring both projects on at once. So we've got two buildings, a little over 400 units, 26 townhouse units. The Faraday West project is about twice as big as the Faraday East, or we're looking at 240 versus 167 or something like that. as we're working through the construction drawings, those numbers have a tendency to change. And just to give you a little bit of we can go to the plan now, just to give you, that was Reston Station, or the soon-to-be completed Reston Station Boulevard in the foreground that both buildings front on. Here you see the Willie exit off of the toll road headed west. Was a Willie Ruston East Metro Station, which from our two buildings, depending upon which building you're in, it's a 7 to 10 minute walk to Metro. You can see our site there. It is just on the other side, on the east side of the project, of the properties that I still believe are controlled by JBG and EYA. And there'll be retail and townhouse developments there that we're aware of. And if anything comes up, you have questions or anything, please just chime in and ask. I'm happy to try to explain things to you. So there you see our two sites in yellow outlined in red. A little bit of an expanded view of the two projects together. To the left, to the west, you'll see the Faraday or the Faraday Park West project, which, as I said before, it's a 7-story, roughly 240 unit apartment building with 10,000 square feet of retail. We think that retail and the retail we'll show in the next project or in the next slide is in the northwest corner of the building, closest to Metro. We think it's a chance, a great opportunity for some kind of a sit-down restaurant. But we think we've hit that threshold at that corner. It's a money corner, but we've hit that threshold at that corner that we're far enough away from Metro that anything beyond that is probably going to be just residential. And then we've got the line between the two projects is really sort of straddles the center line of that alleyway where we've got a pair of sticks of townhouses that back to one another using the alleyway for access to the garage of the townhouses. And then the townhouses themselves, they have front door on a greenway use that is shared as part of our public green space system, and it's also shared front doors for the townhouses and access on raised stoops for the apartment buildings. Here's an expanded view of the site plan. Again, the west building is a full donut. The east apartment building is a C shape. The west building is parked with a precast parking garage that acts as a buffer to the toll road. The east building is it's parked with an extension of the existing parking garage. We will share the parking ramp and build 3 to 4 levels of a flat slab that will serve as the parking for the east, the Park East project.
Just for clarification, is that on the right that you're talking about?
On the right side, yes.
And which part of that's existing?
It's the piece that's just outside of the red box.
This piece is existing.
That's
It
okay.
serves the office.
Okay.
And we are lucky enough that the ramp is here, and so we're able to just tap
Okay.
onto that and take advantage of the existing parking.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you have any views in the presentation? I don't remember seeing any of the south side of the parking garage that will be built on the southwest corner of the site. I'm just curious how you treat
I
the.
do not have some. I have southeast.
Yeah, we do have an image of the southeast, and it's treated the same way on both of those sides, so we can explain sort of the
Okay.
treatment that we're doing when we get to that.
Just curious.
Yep.
Is there a way to make this full screen? I don't think I have that control from.
Presentation.
Yeah, I don't have control.
please, sorry. Let's go back one. Let me introduce this. Now we'll get into some more plan details of the Park East building. The amenity space for the Park East building, you can see by the red arrows on Reston Station Boulevard, the main entries to each of the building. The main entrance to the Park East building is all the way to the east end of the building, and all the amenities are housed in the horizontal piece of the C that's closest to Reston Station Boulevard, and that'll be the next plan view that we see. And these, I don't have documentation of it, but we have worked with the same interior design team for both buildings, and the amenities are meant to really complement one another. They're not repeated programs. There's one program for the east building, one program for the west building, and they'll be shared by both buildings. Here we've got it's a fairly straightforward, the amenity feature, the amenity program in the west building is a little bit more robust, but you can see as you enter into the building, there's kind of in that brown space is a lobby space. Pink is some shared space and mail. The lavender color at the corner is where we have kind of high energy exercise and workout space. We purposely put it there with glass on both sides, just to give some energy and some life to the sidewalk and to the entrance to the Muse sidewalk along Reston Station Boulevard.
Yeah, and the design of that interior was something that we worked through with Fairfax County staff during the zoning process to really figure out a way to activate that street frontage, knowing that this was not a good retail site. And so, as Jack said, we've got the fitness area that'll be transparent and active, and also the co-working space, which is the pink area, which we think will be heavily used just based on the tenant demographics that we're working with. In addition to the co-working space, I think the program that we've got here is actually, it's a really interesting and innovative program for the amenity space, because it really is focused on a lot of the trends that we're seeing in co-working space. So you've got the co-working, there's also a photo room, which is designed with what we've found when talking with a lot of the property managers that Rooney Properties works with. A lot of the tenants in these buildings have side gigs where they're posting high-end photos, and so the photo booth is really designed as almost a photo studio for them to do some of those shoots for any of the online activities that they're doing as sort of a side gig. And then also there's a workshop that's being proposed, again, for, I think, part of, addressing some of the gig economy that we're seeing in terms of the types of tenants that are attracted to this space. And then also the commercial kitchen and baking area, again, for people who are sort of doing online businesses. It provides them with that commercial space where they can do, the cooking and things like that. So really, I think trying to target that demographic that is really going to create vibrancy for this area.
There's a couple of questions relative to the tenants, like who are you gearing toward? Question 1. 2 is like the shared spaces, the co-working spaces, for the people who live in the townhouses going to have access to that too? And then the third question is, well, I'll get to the third question. Where are we with that?
Hi. My name is Lex Lefebvre. I'm with Rooney Properties. What we're seeing with a lot of these newer projects in sort of the urban suburban areas like Tyson's and Reston, you're really getting a huge range of demographics. You're getting people in their 20s that are at their first job. You're getting couples in their 50s and 60s that are downsizing and want the convenience of a full-service apartment building. So it has been somewhat of a challenge for developers working on these buildings, but also really an opportunity to, as Scott said, sort of respond to the new ways that people are living. One of the things you see a lot of out in this corridor are companies, technology companies, contractors that allow for and encourage sort of hoteling, work from home, remote working. The building next door, 1111 Sunset Hills, you walk in that building during the day, there's a lot of empty desks, and it's because they allow people to work from home. So we're really trying to design a building where people can leave their apartment and use common areas during the day to work. And that could be people of all age groups.
So the townhouse people will be using the space? Or
No.
you have to live in the apartment?
It's for apartment residents only, yeah.
Okay, so the townhouses are, what, 3-bedroom, 4-bedrooms, so they're more family-oriented?
Those are generally 4 bedrooms.
Combining that with
That's right.
singles, doubles, couples, whatever you want to call
Th-
them?
Those are family oriented. That's a 2-car garage, 4 bedrooms.
Okay.
Obviously, those people will enjoy all the outdoor amenities that we're programming here, but not the interior apartment amenities.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, at some point after this is all done, is this going to become part of RA? Is that something that we've considered or not? That's something some of the other developments along here are doing?
It's something that we've had discussions with RA about, whether this project becomes a part of RA. I think we're happy to continue those discussions, and if it makes sense for us and for RA, I think it's something that we're open to.
Okay. And, I mean, this will become in Reston, we have what we call clusters. So at some point, this will become a cluster. If it becomes part of RA, then we'll have whatever your standards you all create and so on and so forth, so that we could then begin to participate with that. That's why I was curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I know we're running low on the time that we've been allotted, so we're going to speed this up.
Trying to speed it up a little bit. I will start out here with just a couple of sort of opposing views, give you an overview of the way both of the projects work together as one. This is a view hovering above Reston Station Boulevard, looking at the west building in the foreground. And you can tell there the money shot I alluded to earlier. We've broken the building into smaller pieces, with this white piece being sort of again, the money shot, and the first thing you see as you come out of Metro. The rest of the building is wrapped in a red brick building with some bays and fairly traditional, but also trying to keep it very strict and very modern. The townhouses, they're really alluding to what they could be. They're going to be brick. I'm sure there'll be some tweaks when a townhouse developer is identified, and then the east building is at the foreground of this view here. I think this next shot will show you the other view. And just a couple, kind of a collage of the west building. This is in the upper left-hand corner is the southeast view of the parking garage and some of the public space and the green space. The opposite side, the southwest view, is treated in a similar fashion. This is in the lower right, the main entrance pod for the west building, and a 3D view of the corner closest to Metro of the west building. Moving on to the east building now, I think. Here's sort of the opposite view, the one we started out with the east building. In the foreground, it's broken down along Reston Station Boulevard into two with a tall, thin piece that kind of carries the main entrance, and then the body of the building along Reston Station Boulevard that houses all the amenity at the ground floor and apartments above, with the west building in the background. A view from across the street, looking. Let's go back one or forward one. Here's just a view from the property across Reston Station Boulevard, of the main elevation that fronts onto Reston Station Boulevard, and you get a peek of the Mews between the townhouses, and here on the right-hand side, a peek of the Mews between the townhouses and the apartments.
Jack, you might. Just want to jump in with one thing. The decorative panels that we're showing on the north facade of the garage, that is not the final design of those panels. That was something we put in this just for illustrative purposes to show sort of the scope of what we're trying to do. That art will be done later in the process. We have to go back to OCR and just work with them on final design for that.
I'll explain this view here. We wanted to get a little bit more, a little bit more of the architecture going of the apartment building going down the views. So we've shown the townhouses here, but hopefully you can see through the townhouses and kind of begin to see the mass of the apartment building. As we go along the views, we purposely worked the facade to carry these bays, and they project about 24 feet. They're about 24 feet wide, which reflects the width of the townhouses across the views and begins to break down the scale. So we get to start with a dialogue between townhouses and apartment buildings and the amenity of it.
Just ask you a question, how much longer do you think you have in your presentation? Because we're down to 5 minutes,
I got 5 minutes max.
but that doesn't give us time to say anything or ask
Why don't
any
we
questions.
flip through, we'll
Which is
talk about
okay.
the open
Yeah.
space and then we'll.
Yeah, I'd like everybody up here to have at least 30 seconds to ask
Oh, no
questions
problem,
and
no
thoughts.
problem. I can stop now.
It's all 5 minutes, we're done.
You want to just fly through the rest of the images?
This is the public open space against the toll road to the left. Detail of the views. Overall elevation of the project, looking south. Follow-up elevation of the east building. The elevation of the views of the apartments. This is the view from the south. This is the view standing in the parking lot of 11111. And again, we can fly through these in some sections. I'll leave it to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, all right. I think why don't we start over here, and if anybody has questions, thoughts, reactions, Ken, why don't we start with you?
I'll be quick. I don't know how much of an impact we have, but I'm just curious. The townhouses really appear out of place with regard to the other buildings, but I think that might be beyond this conversation. And then there are aspects of the taller buildings. Many of the units will be looking into a parking garage from one elevation. I see that the view might be nothing more than a garage. The last point I have is the famous term that I've heard over and over again, but it might be, it is what it is, the donut. So there are a lot of things that I would like to get into a conversation about. I know we don't have the time, and I don't know if we have the ability to do that as well. So those are my points, though, for the lights.
Could we go back to the first rendering, because I think it might help people's comments. The first slide. Let's jump around. Jason? Comments, thoughts?
I like the open space network. I like the building materials. I like the variation in scale. I think it'll be a nice product, especially when the rest of the neighborhood is built up between it and Metro.
Bruce?
I think it speaks to the area because it's more, has to be urban. I'm curious to know the connectivity with regard to pedestrian. How is this in relation to the W&OD trail? Is there any connection there?
Yeah, so the WNOD Trail is to the north on the other side of Sunset Hills. Yep, perfect. So probably the easiest way to get from this site to the WNOD Trail is to go down Reston Station Boulevard, which will be constructed as part of this project, go straight up Michael Faraday, and then there's a traffic signal there with a crosswalk, and that's going to be the most direct access. But it should be pretty pedestrian friendly. There's going to be sidewalks, and then there's the signalized intersection to get across Sunset Hills.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mike?
My only comment with these big developments is just try to avoid those through-wall AC units that have those louvers that go on the outside. Just use some sort of building cooling loop or something, just so you don't see all those louvers. It drives me nuts to see those things, so that's my comment.
I think we're good there.
Yeah.
We're good. We're good.
Okay. Bruce?
Let me say, I work on that street on Michael Faraday. I saw the presentation of this P&Z. I think it is, I would never vote for this if we had a vote. I think the muses are much too narrow. I think the little valleys in between. Actually, since I'm on Michael Faraday every day, it's astonishing to me that this project is there, but and I understand it's supposed to be urban, but I think it suffers significant problems. The townhouses, I just that's been mentioned seems so impractical, but you're gonna talk about getting into the RA after this is built, so this is really just for show.
Charlie?
Two questions. What happens east of you? The reason I ask is Fairfax County is big on these 5-foot sidewalks, and when you get to that parking garage, the picture appears to be less than a 3-foot sidewalk. Is there nothing, no light east of you that will require pedestrians to be able to walk?
So there is, and it's, and I think the rendering on this may not show properly, but you do have the location where the existing parking garage sort of comes out, and that's a function of Fairfax County had set the center line for where Reston Station Boulevard goes, and so we were trying to work with what we had there. And so when you get in front of the parking garage itself, it's fairly minimal in terms of the actual landscaping, but it is we actually scaled back the landscaping that area, so you had a wider sidewalk, and then we've got a commitment in our proffers to work on variations in the paving materials, which is, it's sort of making the best of a situation we're trying to work with. But the sidewalk itself is, I think it's actually 5 or more feet. 6 feet. Yeah.
It doesn't appear so in this picture compared to your other walks.
Yep.
That was it.
Yep.
The other question now, is this, the Reston Station Boulevard, you say that's going to be built at the time all the way through to Wheeling? But you're saying it's a 7-minute walk, only if the road's there.
Yeah, so it's the section of Reston Station Boulevard from Michael Faraday and then connecting back out to Sunset Hills will be constructed as part of this project. And
What
actually, the
about
one
over to
section,
Wheeling?
and over to Wheelie, we're relying on JBG and their midline project to move forward to have that direct connection for
Well,
Reston Station Boulevard.
that really isn't part of your.
It's unfortunately, it's not part of ours. We have been coordinating closely with JBG and EYAs. They were going through their process and early on to make sure that all the projects connected with one another from a street alignment design standpoint. But in terms of the actual construction, it's a little
It's
bit out
a
of our control.
significant longer walk to have to go out to Sunset.
Yeah, you've got to go up to Sunset. But hopefully
It's
that's
not
an
significant.
interim condition that
Right,
gets
okay.
resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think the programming of the shared working space is kind of a cool idea. I'm kind of excited to see that come to Reston in this format. I'm just curious what this looks like when it's done with the urban muse and kind of more of a city feel there. I think it's really the first city type of project, or that could say it's coming to Reston with these type of massings. So I'm just curious what it looks like in a few years.
We'll let you do the groundbreaking.
Thanks.
Or give you the ribbon cutting. Yeah.
Neil?
I think the jury's out on what kind of neighborhood this will actually be. Green space along the toll road, narrow mews, leftover industrial aspects to the neighborhood that have always made this challenging. I think getting Reston Station Boulevard through to Wheelie is essential. Having some sense of streetscape may eventually create a neighborhood. The project by itself is handsome to me architecturally, but the urban environment that this is in is still highly doubtful to me. And in the history of Reston, from Lake Ann to Town Center, if this is the new wave, it doesn't leave me that excited.
Yeah, I think we're hoping that, it's transitioning now, and, you've got the Pulte project that is out of the ground. And once I think JVG comes in, you've got that full connection to the metro.
Those of us that have lived here a while, it's hard to view this as a desirable residential neighborhood. Maybe not all of us. It is for me still.
Believe it or not, there are actually families that have moved into the
I-
Pulte project.
You know,
which surprises
more power
me.
to 'em.
I know.
Pioneers.
Yes, I know we got to kind of wrap this up. I just had a couple of quick comments. The positioning of the parking garage concerns me a little bit. One thing Reston likes are more buffers along the street. The one red building, whatever that material is, you've managed to set back, but even your new parking garage next to the old one, really sort of attacks the street, which is something, and it's a parking garage. I mean, it kind of takes away from whatever urban quality you guys are trying to create. All of a sudden have a 1 to 4-story, whatever it is, parking garage. Second comment was, the two new towers that got built at Reston Town Center that are residential, to me, if you look across the street at the Harrison, for example, looks more like a residential project because it has balconies and stuff, you know, it looks more residential. And there are no balconies that I see here. It looks more often like an office building. There's no, you know, facades are pretty flat and single or two-dimensional or whatever. And I don't know, I see at the top, it looks like you have some balconies at the top, but most of the units don't have any way to get outside. I think that's something
Yeah, and
we would look for.
Yeah, the balconies are concentrated, every unit along the views and along the south side, facing the green space, have balconies.
But like this whole wall, looking at the
This rather
townhouses,
formal piece that sits right on Reston Station Boulevard does not have that.
Just the cube doesn't have that, everything else, like every other unit.
but everything looking at the townhouses has no balconies except the top floor.
In between the
No,
bays are
they do.
balconies.
Yeah.
There's
They're recessed, it's hard to
Right
tell.
there, they're the recessed
All of
in
them
between
are
the
not.
bays.
Okay. But along the street front, there are no balconies except the top floor. It's just one of these things that, to me, a residential building has little outside spaces for all the people these don't seem to have, except little tiny, almost afterthoughts. That's my only other comments. I guess we do have to get on with our regular meeting, but thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very informative.
Sorry to run over.
That's all right. If everyone out there will bear with us for a moment, we'll get our regular meeting started here.
The ladies are waiting. Those music and narrow and all the companies, like they're looking at this urban planning.
For the first time in some time, we actually have a 9-member design review board. We have a couple new members here. I'm glad they're here. We're full strength once again. I need a motion to approve last meeting's minutes.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion, a second. All those in favor? Aye. I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any members' comments, general comments about the wonderful job the DRB is doing? You missed your opportunity. Okay, all right. Never
Bring the
mind.
ladies.
I guess we'll get right on into the agenda. I think we have one of our favorite groups of applicants, I believe, are here. We'll start with the South Lakes High School art students suggested Lake Thoreau spillway design. Come on up, all of you.
That was. Good intro. Come on. Yeah.
Oh, I was hoping something like that wouldn't happen.
Don't destroy this building. And then
Yeah, let us at least see it before it falls apart.
It's part of the show.
You could all, when you start, tell us your name, and we assume you're all South Lakes, no interlopers here.
Sorry, you start with names. Hello, I'm Sarah Mamross, and I've been part of STEAM team for 2 years now.
Hi, I'm Catherine Lashley, and I've been here for 4 years.
Hi, my name is Phoebe Liu. I've been part of STEAM for 3 years.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I've been part of this club for 3 years.
So, good to see you all.
Nice to see you all too. All right, so this is our model for this year's sculpture. And as you can see, we've gone with a sort of geometric shaped sculpture this year with lots of cubes. We wanted to explore the idea of originality and uniqueness and what it means to be genuine. And so we made a sculpture that has cubes to represent individual people and how we build off of each other and grow from community and togetherness. So each one of our cubes has color on the inside, but on the outside has sort of a black facade, which is supposed to represent how we sort of put on a facade in society, but inside we're all unique and individual and colorful. So that was sort of our jumping off point for the theme. Phoebe, did you want to talk about materials?
Yeah, okay. So starting off, for all of the cubes, we're thinking of using regular wooden 6x6 beams. And then this wire here is going to be airplane cable. And we're also probably going to have a few more of those, like crisscrossed on certain sides of the box for support. And the rope the string that you see in here is just going to be rope. And then for the stilts that the largest box is standing on, we're thinking of using galvanized metal poles, 5-inch diameter, I think. Yeah. And then for these large panels, that would be strata-glass. And we're thinking about projecting light onto them possibly, which is what all the colors are supposed to represent. And so we would frost the strata-glass so it'd be opaque, and then we would project onto them.
So right now in this model, we have sort of a collection of our ideas. It isn't exactly what would represent the final model. You can see we have some cubes where there are wires crisscrossing within them. Like in this one, which was one of the ideas we explored, is using the airplane cables to create this effect inside them. And another one of our ideas was to add a kinetic element by putting sails in the faces of the box. As you can see with this one, it would be the metal wires and then a ripstop nylon sail made out of this, so it wouldn't rip in the wind, but it would still have the kinetic motion that fabric does. And then our other option was these sheets of strata-glass where we have sort of rips down the middle so that the wind could pass through, but it still adds the geometric elements, and we would be able to project light on them. So those three options are what we're exploring in the sculpture, and we are going to pick one or two of them to move forward with and to add to our sculpture in a sophisticated and cohesive way. And we're going to pass around a photo of our previous sculpture showing you the solar paneled lights that we have and how they can be used to project light on the sculpture. The solar paneled lights turn on automatically when the sun sets and then have a timer for 2 or 3 hours where they will shine the light, but then they will turn off so they don't disturb people in the middle of the night. So this photo we can pass around. That's our previous sculpture, and you can see how we use the solar paneled lights. And yes, it's up there too.
We're also going to be trying to be reusing a lot of materials from Simon, which was the sculpture from a few years ago. And the wooden beams on Simon we're going to hope to try to reincorporate them here. And additionally, for Simon, in order to add structural integrity, we had these brackets called angle irons. The brand is Strong Tie, yeah, I believe. So they're basically like metal pieces or brackets that we're going to put on the corners of the boxes, and we have a photo of that.
Yeah, can you scroll down to that one? So this is our previous sculpture, Simon, and as you can see in the corners, we can use the metal angle irons to secure the corner of the box, which will prevent it from shifting in the wind or collapsing on itself. So that gives it a lot of structural integrity, and having made Simon, we know that that's going to work and be effective on our sculpture.
Just to mention, so the colors you see on the sculpture right now aren't really finalized. Like, we're considering this color palette and definitely doing gradients. But we're also thinking of several different methods to format our gradients. And one idea was we could possibly have, instead of every box being an individual set of colors, we would have colors from the boxes kind of like bleeding into each other where they touch each other. So it would be more of a cohesive, flowing kind of dynamic.
Yeah, so our main idea of having the cubes here and painting them and having them in this sort of format. This one? Yeah. So these would be the final cubes and our shape for the sculpture. But the things we're still considering are the color scheme and the use of strataglass, of the sails, or of the cables in order to give it more visual interest. All right, so if you guys have any questions or things you'd like to, like feedback about the different design elements we've talked about, you can go ahead.
Sure. I had a couple of just quick questions, and then we'll open it up to the group up here. I love your reasoning and your thought process. You guys are very creative, and I'm impressed with the depth and the sort of poetic quality you guys bring to this. Since these are representing people and relationships, I have to ask, which one of you is the little cube on the top? You can raise your hand.
I like the little cube on top.
Okay.
I think it represents sort of like what you're reaching towards, sort of like the goal. It's on the top, and it clearly has been built up by many other supports of the cubes.
Right.
So I think it's a nice little representation of
Yeah, I
working
think
together.
the organization of the cubes, I mean, this is, am I looking at what I'll be looking at from South Lakes Drive? Is that
Yes,
kind of
this is the
orientation
road right here, yeah.
You're looking at?
Mhm.
Okay, so if you could, without stumbling or dropping it, could you sort of slowly turn the whole thing around so we can get an idea of what it looks like from a canoe on the lake versus the houses on either sides and so on? And while you're doing that, how tall is this whole thing?
This largest box, if you don't pay attention to the stilts, it's 8 feet tall, I believe. And the stilts, I think they would add an extra 2 feet.
Okay, around 10 feet high.
So a person's about halfway up the cube then, like a
Yeah.
person.
Because I think the one thing that last year's project didn't quite address as successfully as I thought it was going to was exactly what you just did. As you went around it, it lost some of its dynamic quality because it kind of went post to post. And from South Lakes,
Yeah.
it was very strong, but as you got around it, I think you've solved that problem here. I think
Yeah,
this
we
is
tried to
a much
make-
more successful looking project. I think my only comment would be the little box on top. You need to really think about that. And where is that box going to go? It looks almost as an afterthought at the rear like it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it needs to be a little more prominent somewhere. But I think that this is very interesting.
We did have 2 alternate placements of the little cube. You can see up there, there's the one where it's on the top, and then, I don't know if you can, but if you can scroll down, there's an alternate place, or a picture where we have it placed on the base as well. We also have a picture of it that we can, oh yeah. that
I want
one
to
it
jump
is.
in and say I like the location of the little
Oh.
box on top.
Well, now that you know who it
Yeah.
is, I don't.
So yeah, that picture would be what our original idea was, which was it placed on the base, which gives it sort of a more symmetrical quality. But we thought that it felt kind of heavy on the bottom, and there was too much touching the ground. So we elevated this one on the little stilts that we're hoping, as they'll be painted silver, will disappear into the background. So we wanted to create like a floating effect, and then the little guy on top, just sort of to bring it up and make it more of a motion of rising up rather than like the heavy cubes lying on the ground. But that was the original placement of the little one.
All right, why don't we say Jason, comments?
Great job. I look forward to seeing it.
Thanks.
Jumping to the other side, Ken?
Excellent job. Look forward to seeing the final product.
Mike?
I would say, sorry, I'm always practical. The tilted cube just that connection point, just make sure you figure that out because
Yeah.
it's going to want to keep falling.
Yeah, we would use the same like angle irons to hold it there, like one at a 45-degree angle, and hopefully we could also use like tension cables to hold it
Do
down.
like an interior dowel or something where it
Mhm.
actually is just a giant dowel rod that you don't even see. That connects into the 6x6 into that other
Oh, yeah.
kind of 6x6, and that way you don't even see the connection.
It's a good idea.
Grace?
I love it, and I definitely love the cube on top.
Okay.
And I was gonna say that I think I like the idea that you will incorporate the colors. I don't know if you need to light it per se, but I do like that you've incorporated colors on.
Charlie?
My only comment, and I don't know if it's within your bailiwick, the sign along the path was kind of small and pathetic and not really noticeable. Is there a chance to get one that's more an eye catcher so people, I mean, I walked by it 3 or 4 times before I stopped to read it. And
Yeah, I don't know. We definitely can explore
it
that
needed-
possibility.
The description needed to be a little more readily available.
Okay.
That may be the only time I've ever heard someone request a larger sign.
Yeah, really, really.
Wasn't quite that bad.
Back over here, Bruce?
I think it's great. I like the sense of motion it gives.
Thank you.
Neil?
So I like it a lot too, and I think it's in the context of all the other projects that we've seen over the years, you've found some new way of doing something out there, and I think that's as important as what this piece itself is in the whole body of work through the years. It's a nice new approach.
Nick?
Thanks for coming in tonight. We're excited to see it built.
Thank you.
The last comment I had was if this is truly talking about relationships and so on, and I know everybody loves the little cube up top, but it's the only cube that isn't relating, it's sitting on top of everything. And I don't know if it needs to be linked to something else. All the other ones are kind of grabbing onto each other, and that one's kind of off by itself. And I was just, you might, if that's what you intended, fine.
A little pulsing light or something.
Well, but you know what I'm saying, all the other ones are kind of interlocked, and that one's not. I would just think about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we did paint this one pure white, sort of to play with our theme of originality and having differences. But maybe we could make this one the white one instead to make
It's
it
up to you
stand
guys,
out.
it's your sculpture, but that's just another comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Other thoughts? Okay, thank you all for coming in, I'm looking forward to, motion. Oh, okay.
I move to approve the conceptual, the conceptual design as shown.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Well done. Careful, don't let it slide off its base.
Don't break it now.
The very fact that you made you that uncomfortable shows it's working.
Hey.
Yeah, it doesn't go up to the line, it comes down when you get to the one, you take it out.
I pressed it aside and you're going to share that part. I'm still have this. Okay, Primrose School. Here he is.
I'm here to, my name's Rob Sauer, I live across the street from those preschool, Sutter Ridge condos. I'm here to appeal a couple of your decisions you made. The first one is the fence that was approved. Now, that black trail is part of the Reston Association trail system, and it goes up to the tennis courts and toward the pool, so it's a very popular trail. People walk on that all the time. But we have this, my first issue with the fence is I've never seen a tarp draped over a fence like that in a residential area before. It's more industrial looking or something you would find, reminds me of a construction site as a temporary screening during the construction site. I just don't like that sort of black wall that you're coming across. And it's really in your face as you walk down that trail. And that's a close-up. I don't think the material itself really raises to the bar of what the design guidelines asked for as far as design quality, workmanship, material. It's a fabric I think it's going to wear over time. There's no mechanism for me to come back in a couple years in front of another review board and ask for that material to be changed. It's going to be something we have to live with, forever.
I'm sorry, just to clarify where we are, this is an appeal of our decision for anyone that hasn't read all of what we have here. So what we're looking for is for you to show us a guideline that has been misapplied or new information that we haven't heard before.
Yeah.
So when you say it's a misapplied design guideline, could you clarify?
Yeah, I'm
which
saying
guideline
it
that
talks
is?
about harmonizing with the environment that's in the natural environment. It's in a wooded area. I don't think that's something we would say harmonizes with that environment. And it doesn't harmonize with the residential area that it's in. It's surrounded by residential property.
Okay, anything else?
No. And then this is from Wheatley Avenue. You can see that's a fairly big design element. I mean, that fence goes all the way around the back. Now, that's their backyard, which the way the property is positioned, it really has what I consider two front yards. It faces Wheatley Avenue, the main street, and North Village Road is the other street it faces. So it really doesn't have a traditional backyard. This is sort of our front yard too. And it's got that, every time I look at it, I think it's just a temporary screening for a construction site. It doesn't look like a permanent fence that you would find in a residential area. Originally, they had a fence with the green slats in it, and interweaved within the wire of the fence, which replicated what was there before, I was fine with that. But we had, I don't know why they chose that design of all the fencing solutions for that. It's like they took off those slats and put this tarp up. I don't know why they decided to do that. And this is the other element I have I'm appealing is this this canopy and this large plastic plane equipment, fire truck. I think it's too big for the site that it's on. I don't think that site was really designed for something that big. The roof of that screening structure is really, it's taller than some of the roof line of the.
You have to be careful, we're not, this all got approved. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
So you have, tell us new information, we've all seen this before.
Okay.
So the fact you don't like it isn't new necessarily.
Okay.
But we need to know what design guideline do you think this, since it's not new, we've seen this before.
Okay.
What guideline do you think this has
Again,
been misapplied?
It doesn't harmonize with the structure it's next to. It's next to a very sort of modern-looking structure with straight lines. This is something more I'd find like in a circus, kind of whimsical design. I don't think it matches that element it's next to. I think the proportion, it's not the correct proportion. I think it's going still to the harmonizing with the environment that's in the property it's sitting in.
Okay.
And the red, I mean, that's not something you would find in a natural wooded environment. That color red kind of really, it stands out because it doesn't harmonize. That's my issue with that. So, and this is from across the street where you see it, it really does, it's a big element, that sort of that tent-like structure, and you get the red fire truck is coming through. It's at the entrance of our neighborhood. So it's the first thing you see coming in, and as you leave it, you're going to see it. So it's prominent position, that piece of property in the neighborhood. And the other issue I have, there's a logo on top of that. That picture doesn't show it very well, but you can see it in person. It sticks out. It's a light tan logo on a dark green background. It looks to me like commercial advertising. It's not branding because you can't see it on the side. You really have to be across the street or on the street to see that. I think it's just a commercial sign. Again, doesn't fit the nature of residential. It changes the character. And it's just again that how big that structure is compared to the building it's next to. And the fact that it's red, it really does stand out. I think it's supposed to catch your eye and attract your attention.
When the trees are fully leaved, is it visible at all?
I don't know. This was it was finished, I guess, in the fall and winter.
Yeah.
So I guess you get more screening, but in the spring and summer. But the whole area is kind of thinning out. It's just thinning out over time. It was more wooded years ago. And While I'm here, I'm going to bring up this ask or favor. This was taken a couple of weeks ago, and this was left over from the construction. I think they did some work on their retaining wall and the fencing, but it was never cleaned up. There's mounds of dirt, there's mounds of gravel left over, there's, you can see, it looks like a 2-foot.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stop you there. That's a
Okay.
covenants issue, maintenance issue.
Okay, it's
We're
two
here to
different things.
decide if you have an appeal that we can grant and then rehear this whole thing or not.
Okay.
So if we can boil it down to which design guideline, and I keep hearing it doesn't harmonize, that's all I've heard so far.
Yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting is the
Yeah.
misapplied guideline?
Doesn't harmonize with the wooded area or the residential neighborhood that's in. And the fence, it doesn't, there's a guideline about quality of workmanship, it demands a high quality workmanship materials. I don't think the fence, the target meets that.
Okay. Okay. And again, I don't see anything new that we haven't seen before, so it's based on the misapplied guidelines, okay?
Yeah, right.
All right, we can come up to this side of the table for a minute. Ken, thoughts?
I agree. I don't see anything new. I think this is going to become a subjective issue. So from that point of view, I don't have anything to add. I don't see a need to take this further.
Jason. Jason.
I was not at the last full board meeting this was approved, so, but I will say the one thing that I would have probably talked about, I know the site, it's really well covered throughout the year, so it's hard to see, but the fence, whether or not there's a precedent of that type, it looks like a construction fence, I agree, and I would push for a different solution. Play equipment and the other.
But we're not talking the design yet. Is there a
Nothing.
misapplied guideline here?
Well, it's all new to me since I wasn't here, so
Okay.
I'll stay out of the discussion.
Okay, but if we grant the appeal, then that discussion is appropriate. Okay. Jumping back to the other side, Grace?
I don't see new information presented from what we've seen.
Or a misapplied guideline?
I don't. There's a question about the fence now that I see it, but I'm kind of curious. I think during the season, the summer season, when the trees cover the fence, I wouldn't be.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I don't see any, what I was trying to look back is what actually was approved, well, the fence material, if it had a color. Did staff have was there a specific color that was approved? Was it black or we just approved?
Mention really wasn't involved with the original decision.
So was it ever a part, so it wasn't a part of the original submission?
It was in their presentation.
It was. But we didn't have.
There's a
copies.
picture of chain link fence with a black fabric.
So it was with black
But it
then?
wasn't
So I'm
in
looking
that
at it right now.
So that's not new.
It's new to me, just to jump in and say, I know we're not to my turn yet.
You'll get your turn.
Let me see if I can find it.
Having substantive discussion before we get to my
I
turn.
understand. Bruce?
What is unclear to me, if the issue is harmony of the exterior appearance, whether that was something that was part, I don't know, was what we had focused on, I don't know the answer to that. So that, I don't know if it was misapplied or wasn't applied. So I don't know if that was a discussion, so I don't know how to address that.
Okay. Carly?
No, I don't have anything to add. My only concern is none of the photographs are specifically from his dwelling, so I don't know if this is a real impact on his personal dwelling, or if this is just a generic, and I don't see that was a definite problem.
Nick?
I don't see that the board misapplied the design guideline, in my opinion, in this case.
Okay. Neil?
I think there's new information because we have a affected party who wasn't represented, and I understand the one reason he wasn't here was because he wasn't properly confirmed of the date to be here. So we didn't hear him, and I think he brings a new perspective and new information. And I absolutely was not aware that the fence detail looked like it does. I think it looks shoddy and wouldn't be the sort of fence thing that we would have approved if we had had the magnifying glass put on it. So I would like to rehear this just to disapprove the fence. and ask for a more typical chain link weave like the gentleman described, which this is not appropriate. We do not want this being a chain link detail that we see regularly in Reston because you approved it over at that school.
That's the previous application, so that was in the presentation when it was presented in January.
It shows it going full height. It doesn't look like that out there. It goes partway up the chain link. And it doesn't look like that.
They do have some conflicting information on AS 2.0. They show the privacy fabric, but then their detail says privacy slats may occur. So they kind of have two different things.
Slats are what we typically approve.
So we don't know if we approve there.
Okay. So given what we've all heard, is there a motion one way or the other
I would move that we
on the appeal?
accept the appeal on the grounds of new photographic information for the fencing, and that we rehear at least that portion of the approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, why don't we raise our hands so we can make sure we're good on this? Okay, your appeal's been granted, so now.
I'm a no.
Okay, one no. Okay.
I saw it.
Okay, so now the issue becomes the fence. I gather that's what we granted the appeal on, was the fence and how it looks. Mr. Roseberry, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I'd like to see the applicant provide either dark green or black, full weave, full height of the fence with slats through the chain link, as we typically approve. I don't think that what's been installed rises to the level of workmanship suggested in the design guidelines.
Anyone else have any other comments?
If the mesh were to be removed and there was no privacy screening, would that be acceptable?
I'm sorry?
If the mesh was removed and it was just a chain link, would that be acceptable?
No.
No.
The kinder care in
Screening.
Reston, near me, doesn't have any mesh on their fence.
The red fire truck definitely comes into play if you remove the mesh. I mean, I know that one of the reasons I went ahead and allowed the fire truck was
Screening.
thinking that it was going to be mostly
It's going to be
screened.
hidden, yeah.
I mean, I was out there today, you can hardly see that. I mean, it's like you have to jump, you have to peek and tom over the fence to really see
He
it.
has assured us that any labels on those campus roofs will be rotated to face the building so you cannot see from the street. I haven't been there. Usually it was he trying to stay alive when you drive by. I don't know what it looks like.
All right, there's a motion and a second, and we're going to understand the motion and the second about the fence.
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Okay. He's got to fix the fence.
Okay.
Okay, well, we can. Yeah, I think it was kind of giving us the quick talk.
Okay, Park Garden Lane. This also is an appeal, and Ken, Mike, and myself were part of the original panel, and we have to abstain from this discussion, so Mr. Roseberry is going to take over as chair for this portion of the meeting, and I will, along with Ken and Mike, just sort of sit back.
So you're allowed to participate in the discussion, you just don't get a vote.
I understand.
So if you would introduce yourselves and give us the basis of your appeal, we're looking for, again, new information or misapplied design guidelines.
Yeah, I'm Art Loudensler, I'm the president of Windsor Park Cluster, and we're appealing on the basis of ignoring the existing design guidelines of Windsor Park.
I'm Doug Steinberg, I'm the vice president of the Windsor Park HOA.
And I'm Donna Vitale, I'm the homeowner.
So if you want to go ahead and tell us again, I guess you just did, you're saying that the design guideline was misapplied because it was ignored? That's the basis of your appeal?
Exactly.
Not to put words in your mouth.
The community has had.
In a nutshell.
The community has had a design guideline since the conception of the community that says 3 tab shingles in different shingle colors. And to date, there have been 3 exceptions that have been approved for architectural shingles, which are clearly a deviation from the community's long-established standard. Many homes in the community have already replaced their roofs using 3-tab shingles. The problem is that the exceptions that have been made are against no standard. So now in our community, instead of having 1 shingle style, we have 4. The reason that we're so concerned about this one is it seems that the previous approvals, the exceptions, have been based on precedent. If precedent is going to be used for future approvals, we've got to put a stop to this, or we're going to have 60 different shingle styles in our community.
I'd like to also point out the previous approvals were, and this one, were all approved after the installation was already done.
Anything else to add?
Pretty much.
I want to ask the members of the previous panel how this sounds relative to what you all knew at the time of your decision. Is there anything new there? Were you aware that they had a 3-tab standard in their cluster? And what was the thinking? Can I get some feedback?
Yeah, I think it wasn't horrendously complicated. We heard the gentleman discuss the 3-tab cluster standard. And I think we felt in this case, and the other 2 members on the panel can add to this, but the photo up there is of the house in question, and it's the house on the left. And we felt that aesthetically, it was similar enough in color and look to all the other houses in the row. So based on that, we felt in this one instance, it was okay. It wasn't meant to set a precedent or anything, but we felt it was such a good color match that that's why we approved it.
The only new information I heard was that, and we had seen that, not precedent, but that there had been previously approved architectural shingle approved. Knowing now that new information is that apparently those were all installed without approval and then retroactively got approval was kind of, that's new information that was not known at the time. And that was something I brought up as well, that I'm afraid of, if you do approve something like this, then it does kind of set that precedence. So that is new information I heard tonight.
Ken?
Nothing new from my perspective. I concur, but what I recall hearing was that prior to this homeowner, those roofs were approved after. I was aware of that.
So I guess I want to say that it's unusual for the board to contravene a cluster standard, and this isn't a guideline, it's a cluster standard. It's a little different. I don't know that our panel, for instance, would have done that. It's somewhat subjective. I think strictly looking at it from a color standpoint, we wouldn't overturn this for that reason, because it looks like a good match. One of the things I read in your letter was that these adjacent homes share a common plain roof in the back.
Some of the homes do, not every one, but there are some interior units where 2 adjacent units have one roof plane.
So if you have an architectural next to a 3-tab, it's maybe a little odd in that situation?
A little odd and susceptible to leaking as well. We talked about this when I met with the 3 members of the board. And I asked, is that a problem? And everyone said, yes, it is. So this is why it's going to be difficult for this precedent to go through. We actually have one occurrence of this already where we have an architectural shingle that butts up against a 3-tab shingle on a common roof plane.
I would say from the board's perspective that there certainly has been moved in a lot of clusters in Reston that originally had 3-tab shingles to open up architectural shingles. You guys have chosen not to do that. And I think the common plane might be one strong reason to not do that. Anyway, let's go around and get a reaction from other members of the board that weren't at the meeting, starting with you, Grace.
So I would say that with that information that the cluster board already has the 3-tab, that somewhat concerns me. I don't know if I would encourage that it is continued. I mean, others install and then expect to have an approval for architectural shingles. So that's where I'm concerned.
So do you think there's new information here, or are you saying we should hear it?
So my question is, if the cluster board, if anyone was present during that that.
Who was present at the original meeting? One of you?
I was at the previous review board meeting, I was.
And you spoke, you were heard by the board, by the panel?
Yes.
I'm sorry, when would it be appropriate for me to speak?
Well, you're not appealing, so
I'm the homeowner.
you've got an approval right now. If we decide to rehear this, you'll have plenty of opportunity to speak. Jason?
I don't have any questions. I have been noticing the move to allowing different types of shingles. And I don't know enough, from what I gather, there's a quality difference if you move up to more of an architectural shingle, potentially. And I guess one way to get rid of any potential conflicts is to open it up to a larger palette so people could collaborate on a common roof plane. But I'm definitely, I feel empathetic towards the association as well, or to the cluster. So I don't know where I'm at on this right now.
Think about it, because you may have to vote in a second.
I know, I'm thinking hard.
Bruce?
I feel it's true that the precedent was really one, always these after installed situations, which are always the most difficult for us. I would, on the issue of whether we should take this as appeal, I would accept that as new information for an appeal.
My concern is we're on the third roof. Why wasn't this stopped at the first?
That's a great question.
Well, I mean, was that appealed when the first roof went up? It's before my time. I'm reasonably new here, but that would be, I guess, was it brought up after the first roof went on? And why did this get allowed to happen?
Want to talk 1376?
Margo, do you want to add something at this juncture?
The first roof, I didn't see the DRB application. I don't think you did either. So we don't know what board member signed off on that. The second one, 1376, was an after installation application that I signed off on without comment, expecting the DRB to disapprove it. Because it is so different. I mean, you can't tell really with the color on this one. 1376, the color difference is striking. So,
Let's hear from staff for a second.
That information was available at the last meeting in the notes that were provided in the sign sheets. The first one was 1351 Park Garden, which was approved in 2011, and that was approved in consultation. And the second, and that was not existing. The second one was existing, and that was approved October 18, and that was 1376 Park Garden. So two different colors involved in the decision, both were architectural shingles. The first one was a Certainty oak wood, and the second one was a Certainty burnt sand, which is a completely different product that it looks at a close match to your current sand.
It's not, when I drove into the community, when the roofers were installing it was a head-turning moment because it's so different. And we thought for sure that would have gotten shut down.
Okay, let's get back to our poll. Nick?
I feel like there's other new information or misapplied guideline here for appeal.
You do or don't?
I do.
That's okay.
That's one or the other.
This is not this much. This is a different, yeah, this is.
So my own sense is that we always try to review on the board as though things weren't in place so that we don't feel pressured to approve something. It's not in your guideline. I would have had a hard time if this had been applied for approving it. You guys would have been in the room. To me, that's a misapplication of the process and/or cluster standards. So I'd like to call for a vote. Who thinks there's grounds for an appeal? If you would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hear this. Okay, I didn't do that quite right then. Get a second, and then we have the vote. So that's after the fact.
And abstentions, yes, for abstentions.
Say again.
Abstentions.
Any abstentions? Just, I guess, those three, yes. So we'll go ahead and hear the application now. Apparently, we're going to go through this again. So you've put your roof on, and if you want to go ahead and tell us what you think about your roof.
Sure. I mean, I think I did look at the standards when I was looking for the roof. Even when they delivered the tiles, I said, now these are certainty black moire, right? While they were on the truck in my driveway. And the vendor said yes, and they were. And I was looking, the board has made changes to the guidelines. So what they submitted with the XT25 and the architectural shingles are not acceptable is new. And if you go back into older, archives of the website, you can see that they don't say anything like that. And I'm not sure who to give this to, but
Pass it around.
it says the roof shingle manufacturer's certainty. Here's the website, and then the roof. There's nothing. There's no mention of 3-tab tiles. They know that. I actually flagged that for them in October. I also flagged for them in October that before the decision was made on the second property, that this was creating a problem, and that in fact, what I understood was that they did not even register as an affected party, and I now have these roof shingles that they're saying are out of compliance. So I did my best to get shingles that were in compliance, and I understand that now the information available to homeowners is very clear that it's XT25 and 3-tab and architectural shingles are not available, but that was not the case when I put my roof on. And they also had an opportunity to either register as an affected party or appeal the roofing that went in on the other home in October, and they didn't do that. So I feel like both of the homes that have those shingles can be very visibly seen. One of them is the second home you see when you come into the division. Mine is actually offset, so it's not on the main road. And people will see the first two, the other two architectural shingles before they even see mine. I don't feel like I'm leading the community as the eyesore that's gonna, cause everyone to get architectural shingles. But I mean, in fact, I was compliant when this roof went in.
Say that last part again.
I was compliant when the roof went in, the guidelines were black moire certainty, and that's what I put on it. They did not say anything about 3-tab. And I protested even having the affected party materials submitted when the board submitted it for the original application, because I said it's a misrepresentation, because they represented that the vendor clearly could have gone to the website and seen this information, when in fact, the vendor could not have done that. That was not on the website. It was not articulated at all.
They also could have used their eyes. The Mark 1 eyeball would have proven to them that every other house in the community, with the exception of 2, had 3-tab shingles.
2 that they would see on the way to my home.
Okay, any further response?
I would also like to say my roof is not connected to the other homes. I have an end unit, and it's not, doesn't share a roof line with the next home.
So I guess I'm going to ask Margot again. In your opinion, was the roof in compliance when it was installed? With the existing cluster standard for roofs, was it not specified that it had to be 3-tab when she
They're
installed?
passing it around right now. I think 3-tab is, the original builder product. And the color itself is a complete match. You just have that, when you have that architectural shingle, you've got that dimension. But the color is all the same, it's made by the same manufacturer. The only difference here is an architectural shingle versus a 3-tab shingle. That's it.
So I guess I want to ask the cluster board before we go around the room here again. What is your primary opposition to an architectural shingle if the color is an exact match?
I have a couple of concerns. First of all, the approvals that have been made prior to this are against no standard. there's nothing. So when I look across the street at 1351, the roof shingles don't match. When I look at 1376, it doesn't match. The approvals that have been made are against no standard to date. And it appears from the documentation that we've seen for the other approvals that precedent was used. The whole reason that I feel so strongly about this is because if precedent has been used in the past, then what guarantees do we have that precedent will be used in the future against no standard?
Well, that's not my question, though. In this particular case, we have an exact color match, and the only difference is 3-tab versus architectural. And in her case, most people agree that it's not intrusive and it doesn't look bad. On the basis of her unit alone, I think everyone would largely agree, maybe even yourselves, if you were allowing yourself that it doesn't look bad. So if it were a standard in your neighborhood, what would be the problem with that?
How do we match up in the units that are interior units that have a common roof plane? How do we match up the 3-tab and architectural shingles?
Can that not be done? Is that?
So I asked that question when I was at the previous 3-member board meeting, and I said that's not a good thing to do because you can't weave the shingles together.
What if we wrote a guideline or a cluster standard that said that in those cases, both homeowners have to agree to the architectural? Would you find that objectionable aesthetically in your cluster?
So now the cluster has varying roof styles?
Well, again, mostly in Reston. I mean, there are tons of houses built in Reston before architectural, quote-unquote, architectural shingles were even, widely used. Now that they are widely used, except for maybe in rare cases like these common roof planes, this board usually doesn't care. We let people do 3-tab or architectural. And most clusters don't care. In fact, they probably like it because it's a higher grade look. So in your case, I'm trying to understand why you're holding on to 3-tab, which is not as nice of a shingle. And is it only because of that common roof plane on some units? And can we find a standard that you might agree to?
Think of the lighter colored roofs, brown roofs. When you have the architectural shingles next to the 3-tab shingles, it is a significant difference in appearance. A very significant difference in appearance. And when you start mixing all these up, it just looks bad.
Do you have both colors in your cluster?
We do.
Okay, so I wasn't aware of that. That's new information for me.
That's what it says. Some have brown roofs and some have black roofs.
Right.
Let's go around and get questions. Ken?
I recognize, having been through the neighborhood a few times, the rows that are more tan in color with the brown roofs, there is a distinction, but that's not what we're discussing tonight. When I look at this roof, the color matches, I look at what has now been provided to me in terms of the homeowner's asked to match the color, and she did. I think it adheres to a good design quality. If anything, I think we have some leeway in terms of enhancing. You can deviate, I think, from a standard if it improves it even further, but I'm going to stand with my decision that I don't think in this instance, which we were asked to make a decision on, that it is a significant issue at all. It doesn't share a roof plane in the back, so no further questions.
To be clear, we're discussing approval of the application.
Yes.
Okay, so I would support approval because I think she was following the guideline from what I could tell from the cluster standards. I think it matches fine between the architectural and the 3-tab. I would suggest that the cluster really think about what they want to see in the future and they can hone in on their experience and be open to some higher quality materials that match.
I concur with Jason. Nothing else. I concur with Jason. I have nothing else to add.
I still think, I know we're looking at this one up there, I still think the cluster should look at updating their standards. It's, soon the 3-tab might not even exist. I think you're gonna be right here in 10 years, and everybody's gonna then have some 3-tab, some architectural, because that's all that exists, so.
That's a bridge we'll cross when we come to it.
You might as well start building. I mean, that's my opinion.
So I'd just like to throw out that I have a letter here from Trevor Wright from October 12th. I was responding back to a question from Art, and Trevor says that thanks for the email. I can assure you that I'm very clear with anyone that contacts me with questions about roofing that the cluster standard is 3-tab shingles in colors to match CertainTeed cedar brown, oak wood, or moire black.
Okay. Bruce?
I don't like to substitute for the cluster standard, and so here I'm stuck. But I will say this: I live in a 3-tab neighborhood, and I think it's not for us to say my neighborhood or that neighborhood if they want to have a 3-tab. That's their concern. I don't think, and I do have sensitivity to the fact that when you mix it, that's fine if the neighborhood wants to mix it, but if the neighborhood doesn't, if the cluster doesn't want to mix it, it's not for us to say, yeah, but it's better. It's their choice. It's visually their neighborhood. So I'm not happy to hear that we want to substitute their sense if they had the standard. But not having had the standard, I'd be hard pressed to override the approval.
Now, we have had the standard. I have a book, a binder with the standards in it, and it says 3-tab shingles.
I guess we're looking at.
It says Reston Association on the front.
The book we're looking at doesn't say 3-tab.
And that's where I was going to go to, is if they'd come in and Trevor wasn't here to handle this, and Trevor didn't have that email to you, that I would have said this. Let's pretend that didn't exist. Going through this book here, I don't see anything that dictates 3-tab shingles. So if that is the case, I see how a mistake could have been made in this instance because this book's not clear. And pretend your website didn't exist for your cluster. I think this book would still dictate over a website.
If Trevor Wright was replaced, we would refer to that book for your standard.
So that's where I'm coming from on.
But you refer to
thought
pictures
here.
in that book too, and they show 3-tab shingles on every picture.
This is true.
And if you're changing from what the current is, that you need an approval, you can't do it without an approval. And you changed what you had previously. But anyway, that's getting my, did you weigh in?
No, I have nothing.
Nick, do you have anything else to add?
Besides that, I was gonna, one thing, assuming that roofing contractors are gonna make the right decision, I think it's a dangerous argument to make, or,
Obviously.
yeah, just for future things.
Richard?
I guess I go back to the panel meeting we had exactly the same discussion then, and I think an aesthetic judgment, in my mind, looking at this, is the only one we're talking about. I still think we made the right decision that night.
We're hearing you.
I think that this is fine. I don't.
So luckily,
I'm not sure when the 3-tab thing got added to the cluster standard. But I
luckily,
think this was done, when this was done, it wasn't part of the standard.
Luckily, we have 9 members here tonight, so there's going to be some kind of vote one way or the other on this. I'll say, since we're hearing this, that my view is the cluster standards are upheld unless there's really strong reason not to. And that if you're changing the shingles from what you have now to something else, there's an application and you will find out that the 3-tab shingle is what the cluster wants, if you don't know. So it's pretty simple, and I agree it doesn't look bad, but it's not the cluster standard, and if it had been applied for as it should have been, it wouldn't have been approved. That's pretty straightforward, and that's the way I approach this. That said, we're going to take a vote, and everybody's going to vote like they want.
I'm still not clear. I'm under the impression that the facts are that there was done a cluster standard. So I want to make sure that my understanding is consistent with what you just said.
I don't think it was, so I guess we can have a different way of perceiving this. It does not meet the cluster standards, in my opinion.
Although the 3-tab shingle was not part of the cluster standard.
You can't say the absence makes something a cluster standard.
No, but the specificity of saying it has to be 3-tab is not there. And the applicant went ahead
If
with
you're
their
cha-
roof
if you're-
matching the color, because that's all the standard
If you're
says.
changing what's there, and what was done originally is the standard, and you're changing it, if you're not changing it to something that's clearly spelled out, you're making a change and you have to apply for it.
I didn't realize that I was making a change. I
But it's
looked for
clearly
the
not the
standard.
same.
That's right, but I looked at the standard, I looked at the website, I confirmed the tiles before they went on, and after they went on, I realized that there was a difference between my house and the house next door, but I had nothing articulated that said anything about 3-tab, so I didn't even have that in my vernacular to work with the roofing company. I really tried. I had no intention of making a change.
Of course not. I mean, you don't want to be here doing this, and we don't want to be here hearing this. None of this is pleasurable for anyone.
Well, let's cut to the
Can I-
chase. I'll make a motion.
Can I ask a question first before, as the design review board, and I'm new to the board, but are we here to encourage clusters to update their standards and not use antiquated products that, if we only have ever approved T111 siding, all of Reston would still be covered in T111 siding?
We don't make the decision for the boards.
Well, right.
They need to apply for it.
But
It's not
she did
supposed to
apply.
happen retroactively like this.
Well, right, and we're not setting a new standard.
You are, in effect, in my opinion.
I think it was done 3 roofs ago, 2 roofs ago.
I mean, Richard kept saying at the meeting, does it aesthetically, would we approve it aesthetically? Literally, I still cannot tell to this day the difference between the two shingles.
Yeah, it's not an aesthetic issue, it's a cluster standard issue. And whether or not this board wants to overrule a cluster, that's the way I look at it.
But don't we as design professionals know better than somebody who's on a cluster board?
Yeah, that's where you get into trouble.
I mean, I'm on my cluster board too, and
I think what I'm finding out tonight is that this was not part of the cluster standard, other than the photographs that show what it shows. There was nothing specific in the standards saying everything has to be 3-tab. So there was no standard that we're objecting to or causing a problem or changing or doing anything. It was not in the book.
I think that's
what we go by.
disingenuous. There's a clear change from what was out there to something new. That's a change of a standard.
I think you're, not to belittle the general public's knowledge of such things, but I imagine if you walked up to anyone on the street and said, you want architectural, you want 3-tab, they wouldn't have a clue what you were talking about. And I think that's probably the case here, I think.
But if you walked up to somebody and
Hold on a
said, you
minute.
want your roof to look the same in your community, or do you want it to look like it's
I understand what you're
sprinkles?
saying.
They wouldn't understand that.
Thank you. Let me finish my sentence. I think the applicant in this case did her homework, looked at the standards, looked at the website, said there's nothing in here about the type of shingle, architectural with 3-tab. There's a lot in there about the color. She followed that. As far as she was concerned, she followed the cluster standard. That's why I don't think the panel that made this approval before was concerned about that.
I concur.
In any case, I think we've all heard this. I think this is a somewhat simple and complex issue all at the same time, and people see it differently. So all in favor of,
Who's allowed to vote?
everybody votes. We're hearing an appeal. It's brand new tonight. So
I think we need a motion. I'll make a motion that we approve the roof as it exists.
Second. I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you. You get your room.
Thank you.
Ridiculous.
No.
No, 7 to 2.
I thought there was an abstention because it was done in the panel, so I have that information on the sheet. You guys have already voted in the panel. so
They didn't
here.
vote on the appeal, but then they vote on the new decision because it's a new
Okay,
decision.
vote on the new decision?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, now we abstained from the
7 to
appeal.
2. You abstained.
I didn't, well, no, I bet you it's everyone.
Okay.
No.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
7 to 2.
Okay.
let's move on to Beacon Hill Cluster.
I'm not that guy.
So they were moving up.
Yeah, I just, when these are put together, is it just that person, doesn't, literally assembling what they do, specifies what aspects of architectural.
No, I think we're doing it very differently than we used to.
We did it 40 years ago.
Please effectively, please read.
Gentlemen,
Please see.
Okay, Beacon Hill, talk to us.
Hello. Now, let's introduce ourselves.
Go
Go
I
ahead.
apologize.
So we were just discussing, I forgot to mention if there could be, in addition to the stipulation, that they do add the section about having to be 3 tabs shingle, so it's clearly written in the cluster standards.
You say that you suggest that they do that.
Yes.
And
that's
put it
added.
into our book here.
Revision.
Yeah.
Motion to make sure that in the second you're okay with that.
Yes.
Everybody okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Now, please proceed.
Well, hello, we're the Beacon Hill Cluster Association. I'm Gamble Gilbertson, the president of the HO of the cluster. To my right,
Bill Derrick, I'm on the landscape committee for the cluster.
he's the chairman of that committee. To my left,
Carol Canizero, and I was sort of spearheading this project.
she's the landscape liaison for the cluster.
And Sandy Wilson, landscape designer, been working with the cluster on the tree replacement plan.
We also have an additional board member sitting in the audience, Mike Rush, vice president. And Carol, please take it away.
I wanted to first say that I reviewed the application that Vern sent me, and I think that maybe some of the diagrams are missing, that you don't have the completed, updated application that they requested. So if it is missing as we go through it, it's the detail for the design for locations 1, 2, and 3. If that's not included, I have some diagrams for you. And I'm sorry about that. Yeah, you don't have the updated diagram.
Right, Vern did request that we outline phase 1, 2, and 3. So we did break it into pieces.
And then we also provided detail for locations 2 and 3. And so do you want me to give some to each end, some of these diagrams to you so that you have the updated diagrams, or?
I think just generally it would be helpful if you just kind of went back and said, this is what we're removing, generally this is what we're putting back.
Okay.
And if we kind of agree it's going to be the same total screening effect
Okay.
previous trees had, then I think that's what we need to hear.
Okay,
Not going bush by bush kind of thing.
All right. It's really the same kind of tree. It's Leland cypresses that were planted in the late 80s and early 90s. There are 58 of them throughout our entire property. And we've as you go through our application, you can see that we've divided it up into 7 areas. And we've also phased it. We want to, this is a 3-year plan, and what we'd like to do is see what happens in the first year and be able to modify, our subsequent phases if we have any problems. And the Leland cypresses, we consulted a arborist. They're diseased. They have Ceridium canker. Our next door cluster, Solar Ridge, replaced their Leland cypresses because they start toppling over. Our affected party is worried that they'll topple over, on, their cars, and we're worried about it too. So, we hired, we got consulting from a landscape designer and an arborist, and we have a plan to, replace the 58 Lelands throughout our community in, over a period of 3 years. And that's basically, what we have here. And we'd like to do it in phases So we've only done the detail for the locations in year one, which is location 1, 2, and 3. It's a third of what's on Twin Branches. It's like a corner that's the entrance to our property, and then it's the street side on the Shores community. And so that's what's in phase 1. And you really don't have the updated diagrams, but we have our landscape designer that can speak to the selection of trees for the replacement. And, we feel that we're doing something that is, better in the long run for the community, because we're replacing, we had a monoculture in there that got diseased at all one time and needs to come down. And we're replacing it with, like a series of different trees, trees that are not only evergreens but deciduous, flower at different times of year. We think it's really improvement for, our cluster and also adjacent clusters. And do you want our designer to go into the selection of the trees?
I think what would be helpful to me, if you could put up one of the little landscape plans that shows the arc.
Okay.
One of those.
All right, and
You could-
I have a better one that I could give to you guys. Do you
That
want-
would be helpful if you could.
That, yeah, if we could see that, but would just generally help if you
And,
could approach the screen, as
yeah,
it were, and sort of say, this is what we're putting, this is where it's going, because the little drawings I have are so small I can't read them.
I actually have a large.
Thank you.
Don't mind, that's fine.
Can you go full screen on that, Margo? Or the dangerous report?
So this is Twin Branches here. And this is
hard to see that anymore.
Greenland Cypress is 37 miles from. And visually, of course.
Oh, thank you.
It's very dominating, and it's monoculture. So unbeknownst to casual passerby, there's actually a second row of trees behind us. So there are quite a few evergreens, which are primarily hemlocks, but there are also some firs and pines. And there are also a series of red maples. One of the diagrams that we're going to pass around will show you the combination of the two. So this particular plan, because it gets very busy showing both rows, this is just what would go in to replace the Greenland cypresses. And it's really just a mix of primarily native, trees, but we have the emerald
Good job,
green
too.
American variety, Asian clusters of 5. We've got this is cherry laurel. It's a little bit of a pattern because again it is on the street, but it's also meant to be fairly informal and sort of good. We have a fringe tree. We've got one that's promised witch hazel. We've got American hollies. And those are sort of the taller. And the idea is to keep it sort of between 20 and 25 feet tall, so we don't go back, since we do have this tall row of trees behind. And then we've also included a front layer of shrubs to kind of help at the ground level. So we've got Henry Gardens, sweet spire, shamrock, and sort of a pattern going across the roof.
Will irrigation be installed or something to keep these alive for the first year? Or even temporary irrigation?
What we were planning on doing is, I don't know if you're familiar with alligator bags. So we were going to put alligator bags on the trees and then fill them up as they needed it. And, really water them, like for the first year or two. Make sure that they survive. And also, like, monitor them, like during the first year, to make sure that what we're planning is, that we have no problems with it, and we want to be able to adjust it if we have problems, if we have reactions from our residents, that they don't like what we planted. We went around originally, and every resident that is directly impacted has signed off on this application. We were unable to contact one, but everybody is sort of like happy about this. If you look at, go through the application and look at what's there, it's really pretty ugly. And, the trees in back of this, where we're taking out the leaves, they're dying. And if, in the application, there are close-ups of the lower third of the tree is just all branches. It's also like these trees are like too large for their space, too closely packed. We have to trim them each year so that they don't impact the sidewalk that's there. We think that this is a significant improvement, and the trees are in fact dying. Leland cypresses are supposed to have a 10 to 20-year age span, and ours are in senility. I
They're of a
guess.
certain age.
Yeah.
They're, they're 30 to, close to 30 years old. And also, we don't want them to fall down. Like with this Ceridium canker, it starts, affecting the tree from the bottom and goes up. And as it loses its root mass, these shallow-rooted trees can tip over. And so we want to prevent this from happening.
I have a question. Is the plan to do the same design at all the other locations as well?
It's a slightly different, because there aren't nearly as many trees.
Right, yeah. 'Cause I saw the one where the main entrance kind of come in, there's the two that are there. So it's a much smaller.
Exactly. You're replacing in that one, we're going to replace two Leland cypresses for 30.
We
But
want to
that's in
make
phase
sure.
one, correct?
Yes, that is possible.
And we want to make sure that, for example, at the entrance, that our sight lines for traffic are improved, because right now there are some obstacles.
I just didn't necessarily see a design for it, so I didn't know if that was.
Yeah, there is a design
yes.
for.
It's,
I haven't had the same.
Oh, I thought we were.
Yeah, there's a design for location 2, which is the entrance, and then location 3, which is the shores.
Right. And so we kept the same plan.
It's not phase one.
A quick question to the affected party. Are you in support of this? And you're just happy the trees aren't going to fall on your car?
No, I concur with Carol that the wetlands are in awful shape and they need to be removed. And the shores just wanted to be informed of what the replacement plan was. And so Carol showed that to me this evening. Our hope would be, and I guess the landscape designer would speak to this, is we now have trees that are 50 feet tall. So we are lower in Beacon Hill, and the front portion 3 is where the hillside begins. Directly above that is a large home. So when you remove those trees, what do you see? And you would see the entire backside of the home facing our neighborhood. So we're hoping that a staggering, which is done with trees that are going to have height enough to, again, create that screen effect, which is, I'm assuming, why they were put there in the first place.
So you've looked at these plans, and are you happy with what they're putting in the area that you're talking about?
My only question, having looked at it, is I'm not sure about the height for some of the larger ones, what the maximum is, because if it's 20, we're going to be looking at someone's backyard.
Well, the particular cultivar that I picked for that spot is the American color line, which I think the height is around 30 feet at maturity. It is on a hill, and so you do look up. And another option would be to use the Green Giant, which gets a little taller than that, but then we're also talking about really getting some very big trees.
And that's the problem you have out there now. I don't want to repeat it's the problem you have now in another 20 years. With Arborvitae instead of Lelands.
How tall does the American holly get? Because I see there's 3 of those as well.
Yeah, I think about 15 to
There's, one of the diagrams has the heights on it, and whoever has that diagram, they can tell you what the height and width of the tree is.
You mean at installation?
Or
No,
at
maturity.
maturity.
At maturity, the extension.
Do you have the tree for tree kind of ratio? I know we're putting some lower shrubs as well, but we're removing 58 trees. Do you know what the final count of how many trees are actually going back?
Well, for the section, like, section one, location one, there are 10 ten Leland cypresses in there, and we're replacing that with about 23 trees.
So the ratio is much more.
We're replacing with, large trees, and then, some are shrubs, some are small, smaller, some are, vertical. So we're replacing it. We're replacing a monoculture with, a series of trees that do different things, like our deciduous, our evergreens, our flowering, our small shrubs. What we went to our covenant advisor, and he pulled the initial plans for that area, and it was more like what we're putting in. It wasn't like monoculture, it was, different trees that were, deciduous and evergreens.
The
and
original plan was
lower
not
shrubs.
followed.
Yeah, the original plan was
Yeah.
not followed.
The one thing that happens here, gosh, it must have been about 12 years ago or 13 years ago, where Wheelie hit Sunrise Valley. If you turn left and head toward South Lakes, there was a cluster there that did a similar plan where they were taking a third of their frontage trees out along Sunrise, and they did the first section without coming here. And half the people went nuts because the stuff that went back in wasn't 30 feet high and, had been there. And I think in that case, it was all white pines, which is the builder's second favorite thing, usually, whether it's leylands or white pines. And they were really scrawny looking, but what got put in, everyone, it's like the other 2/3 were up here and they were down here. Well, now these have grown up to here and these are getting there. And it's that initial shock of having all that big stuff go away. But now 10 years later, it's provided a perfect screen all along there. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think your selections are good. I'll defer to our landscape people here, but I think it's. I like to see things that in my mind look a little more forested and not just a whole bunch of screening. Like a whole row of leylands doesn't do a lot for me, but what you're doing with the hollies and all the other things you're putting in there, it's going to look more natural. I think it's a good selection of plants.
So are we
part
just
of our-
approving year one, or are you just bringing us year one, or are you going to come
We
back
only-
after
we-
you've seen
yeah,
what
we-
happens?
Yeah, we've only brought you the detail for year one,
Okay.
and that is locations 1, 2, and 3.
So after
I'm
you
sorry, I have
get
a
the bug-
misunderstanding with my board mate here. I thought we were submitting for all 3 years because we have an approach that, we have a fiscal approach and a aesthetic
We
approach.
submitted for all 3 years.
Right.
But we don't have detail.
Oh, okay, because I was under the impression, perhaps my mistake, that because we were having a full board review and we're doing something that's atypical from the 18-month requirement to complete our work, I thought we were doing a full board review so that we could get a 3-year plan. We're happy to come back and I guess do an update, but I had a misunderstanding.
Well, yeah, I think, we would have to do an update because we don't have detailed plans for year 2 or year 3.
I would say
Okay.
on the Twin Branches, that is locations 1, 4, and 6 in the plan, and it's really just a continuation of the same plan. So that's, so it's designed to all sort of read as one.
Even though there's separate phases.
Yes.
Okay, if we can pause for a minute, you can sit back down if you'd like. Thank you. Why don't we start over here with Ken for comments, questions, whatever?
No, I think that in general, I think there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. I'm I'm sensitive to your affected party next door to you, the Shores. It looks like they're very receptive to the effort, but they do have some concerns. So I would want to make sure, given we haven't seen any detail for that phase, it sounds like that's going to be the last phase.
Part of, phase 3, or location 3 affects them.
Yeah.
That's their entrance, but location 7 is year 3, and there's no detail on that.
Okay. So I'm just sensitive to that, but in general, I'm not an arborist, but it looks good to me.
Grace?
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. So just for clarification, only Leyland cypress trees are being removed?
That's correct.
No deciduous. I saw some remain in existence of citrus trees. And then I see that it'll be phased, one location there. Number 2, has thought been put into just making sure that the sight line is clear where that entrance is? But I do like the mix of proposed plantings.
Just to
Thank
follow, sorry.
Yes.
Just to follow up with Ken, in location 3 is being addressed in year 1, and I believe that is the primary concern for Audubon Shores, right? The ones at the entrance are the ones that are scariest, right?
We also share area 7A, and I concur. I think it's fabulous to make sure you're planning to get that approved. And the Shores would simply like to ask that detail is figured out. Just show it to us. We're all good. Because it's, I think it's important.
Okay.
Interruption done.
Okay.
Okay, Bruce?
Good, thank you.
Nick?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice plan that you guys have put together here to get some varied interest and year-round interest. I struggle a little bit with the arborvitae. I was wondering if you had thought of any other alternatives like eastern red cedar to replace that. It's something that looks a little bit more natural. The arborvitae to me is more of a garden type of columnar plant, and
Yeah.
the eastern red cedar might offset that a little bit.
Yeah, the challenge with the eastern cedar is that this is a fairly shady location. And so that was on the options, but the worry was that since it would only get a little eastern sun, that it just would not thrive. But the arborvitae is going to do a little better in the shadier conditions. So.
Okay, Neil?
So I've got to congratulate you too on finally addressing this. And having lived in Reston and sort of seen those trees go from being almost hemlock-like when they were younger to the monsters they became over time, we've been wondering when something would happen. I think when they were younger and they were a little softer, and you saw the deciduous trees tall behind them, that it actually worked better. Again, when they got as tall as they are now, it was that monoculture that you're talking about in the barrier along there. And certainly the houses are very close to Twin Branches. And I know I'm an expert on this because I drive down Twin Branches so often, that I have a lot to, as an architect and as someone interested in landscape architecture, I enjoy the cluster and I appreciate the problem of that narrow space there, facing mostly north or east. What I liked about, again, the younger Lelands was there was some, in my mind, visual compatibility with the deciduous trees. And I just want to echo what Nick said. To me, some of the more columnar arborvitae that you're using are going to look very out of place. They do not look woodland. They're going to look very suburban, if you will. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think that looks right. So I really like the variety you've got. That's the only thing that I question. And for instance, where you have the 3 Groot Spire arborvitae in place of the Lelands, those guys look like they belong in Tuscany somewhere. It just doesn't feel right to me. And I'm sure you've thought about it, and I'm fine if this is absolutely what you think is best. But because it's one of those throughways in Reston, you want to have that as much as you can. I think we like to have that sense of driving through native landscape. And I think you're using enough of it where it's not as native looking as it ideally would be in my mind. And you've got enough ornamentals and flowering things mixed in where it all starts to be maybe just, I'm fine with all the flowering stuff, but I just think when you add to it the columnar form of these very spiky arbor vitae, that it'll be pretty, but I just don't think that last little bit of it is quite right. So I put it back on you if you would consider something else.
Well, we could certainly check maybe with the arborist and get his thoughts on whether or not a cedar, because I personally prefer the cedar myself, the eastern red cedar. It is very evocative of sort of the Virginia countryside.
At the risk of saying something inappropriate, I think the arbor vitae cheapen Beacon Hill. I think it's a classier cluster than arbor vitae.
Yeah, well, arbor vitae is a native plant.
Charles?
It is overused sometimes.
Well, no, I'm familiar with what's there now, and I think this will be a great improvement, but other than that, I much more plans.
Mike?
No comment. Jason, I concur with arborvitae though. It's, echo that.
In fact, to me, I've never liked those skinny trees. They look like something that should, line the driveway to a Renaissance plaza or something. But I think we're looking for more natural kind of look here. So I would seriously suggest finding another substitute for that. Other than that, I think what you guys have done is pretty amazing. I think it's going to, 10 years from now, we'll all be happy to see it. We'll all be here.
One of the questions, you consider Atlantic white cedar at all on your list as an alternative? They could do okay with the drought a little bit.
Yeah.
And there are some cultivars that are small that might work, just a thought.
Right, I think I did look at them briefly, but I was more focused on the eastern red cedar.
When I was looking up the Ceridian canker, it seemed like cedars were susceptible to that also. So we have to be a little bit concerned.
Is that something that's in the soil that have to transfer?
Well, as I was reading it seemed like it was the way you planted it. If you planted it in clay soil, if you planted it too close together, if you didn't water it, well enough during drought, then these trees, like cedars and Leland, were susceptible to the canker. But, I think we can go back and we appreciate your comments and we'll just look at this.
Okay.
Explore, and again, I guess to add to it, it's more so you want to make sure that they are well established. This is more like the trial period for the first year or so, it's either,
right,
yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're voting on phase one
Yes.
and what you're showing us this evening.
And, like phase one and just this entire concept, and that we would come back with detailed plans for the phases, for the locations that we haven't presented to you. Because we have presented, like Sandy said, detail for along Twin Branches, which is, like location 4 and 6, which are in phase 2 and 3.
Okay.
So we're basically asking you to approve all the ones that we've provided in detail, and so we haven't provided you detail for location 5 and 7.
Okay, right.
So it's actually a little bit more than year one.
Mhm.
We're part of year 2
Yeah, great.
And
Okay.
and 3, sorry.
The only thing I would add is that wherever the motion ends up is whatever you decide to substitute for the arborvitae, let staff know
Yes.
what your decision is, just so we have some record of it.
Maybe it could be emailed around.
Yeah, and then staff can email it around to us, just so we get some idea of what you're substituting. Okay? Any other questions?
Yeah, are we making it a requirement they substitute or an option or encouragement that they?
I think I would make it a
diversify?
requirement, because I think those trees are gonna look ridiculous, but that's just me. Those skinny little things.
I don't want to undercut your work because we appreciate it, but really would like to make it a requirement if it's okay with you guys. Are you amenable to that, or you feel like we're really?
I feel it's a little heavy-handed to make that comment to our landscape designer who's been working with us for 2 years on this plan.
We have to look at
But-
all of Reston. I know you're working with a
Sure.
particular cluster. We're just trying to make it sort of.
Oh, yeah, no, and believe me, I am not offended at all. I mean, the way our process worked was I put together a plant palette and then shared it with the cluster, and then they selected plants, and then I worked them into the design. So it's been a very cooperative process, and I'm a landscape designer. I love plants. I'm never wedded to one plant. So I take the point. It was simply trying to get some evergreen that wasn't going to get overly large, since that's been a huge issue, that was going to thrive in those conditions. So we'll take another look at it. And it may be that we won't even need them, since we do have the backdrop of the other trees that are going to remain.
Okay, great, thank you. So is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted with the stipulations regarding the tree substitution, and an additional stipulation that the phases beyond phase one are brought to the board for final approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion?
Yeah. I understood that we're talking about these in phases, but I also understood that we have a detail for everything in 5 and 7. So I don't know why we'd tie phases that for which we have a detail to make them come back for those.
I think what they describe as locations are the phases. So I think they're finishing phase one they have the detail for phase one. And another way to stipulate, anything where they have not provided us detail, they need to provide us detail. I'm willing to approve the overall plan, but for anything that has not been shown to us in detail, needs to.
Okay.
Richard, would it have to come to the full board if it was handled?
Next panel.
Yeah, I think as long as it goes through a panel that has.
As long as it goes through
landscape
panel, it's
design.
fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Yeah, we got
I'm
two,
sorry,
so
what
we
does
got
that
2
mean,
shots
go
at it.
to the panel?
Meaning it doesn't have to come to the full board, so you may
We don't
be
have
able to
to
get
do
this
this.
done quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We had a question, the arborvitae like stipulation, would it just hold for twin branches or throughout any of the locations?
Especially on twin branches. And then I think you guys need to decide the rest of it.
I'm open to you using it interior, but along twin branches, just look at something different.
I mean, just to add to it, because in this sense, it is offset behind. It's not at the forefront along twin branches. Is that correct?
I'm having a hard time
It's not,
hearing you.
it's offset, meaning it's not at the forefront where you do have the arborvitae, right? The
Right.
placement of it. Okay.
I did want to just tell you that across the street in Solar Ridge Development, they have lots of evergreen arborvitae. So we would be matching. But, like they have, like.
You have
Sort of.
more trees there along twin branches. Anyway,
They have it set up like, sort of like a screen, like sentries, and ours are like sort of interspersed. Right.
I didn't review the ones across the street.
Not to belittle the arborvitae's, I mean, I'm okay with some. I think we make the stipulation that we try to get a little bit more diversity and that some of the arborvitae can remain behind the screen.
they're just- Yeah, I mean, I do
I'm
have one
comfortable with
concern.
revising that, use your judgment, but try to diminish it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay with the motion maker and the second?
I'm comfortable with that change.
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? There you go.
Good work.
Thank you.
Good luck with all that. You've got one of the most visible pieces of roadside in all of Reston, so
Yeah,
it's
we
going to be
think-
gorgeous, I know.
We look at it as our present to the rest of Reston.
And anytime you're on twin branches, want to stop and water some trees.
Yeah.
Because the rest of us are going to be carrying water.
They were pretty when they first got set out.
It's gonna be a lot of water.
And nobody knew what Leyland's were gonna become.
Yeah,
I would do what we did in Waterview. We got permission to use a fire hydrant. Yeah.
Okay, let's,
Put up a few hoses.
let's see if we can, is anybody willing to have this continue for another hour, or are we done?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Make a motion then. Is there a motion to adjourn? What are we looking at?
The chair doesn't.
Satellite.
I'm sorry?
5G. Talk about the
You
satellite.
wanna look up at this tonight?
It's not on the
You
agenda,
guys
that's
don't
why I
have to
didn't
look
know.
at it, I think you need to keep in mind that this is an zero only, and that.
Excuse me, we
Still have a
still have a
meeting.
meeting going on here. Thank you. Anna, go ahead.
If you want to adopt any aesthetic requirements, to have any overview on this, you have to do this by April 15th. So you would need to look at doing some guidelines by April 15th in order for them to be able to be adopted. So you need to give some thought to whether you want to have any overview on this. So there is a timeline.
Does everybody know what we're talking about?
No.
I would love a quick 30-second.
Because there are lots of changes being made, right?
I'm sorry?
There are lots of changes being made.
Yes.
Who can do the best job in 30
I
seconds?
want to understand the difference between zoning changes and how that affects covenants, which I've always understood to be entirely separate from zoning. I don't see why this affects us.
Because the way I read it, they can do whatever they want, there's nothing we can do about it.
And we can do whatever we
In
want, and there's
covenants,
nothing
you
they
can
can do about it.
No, in covenants, you can, though, right? You can set standards. Whereas
So
in
we have
zoning, you can't
standards.
regulate that industry, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna get to, it's gonna get to a point where if somebody, it's kind of like the satellite, basically. If somebody, if somebody comes and says, I want to place a satellite on my house or on my property, and you can tell, and they come to you and say, my provider says that, this is the only place on my property that it can be placed, and I have to have that in order to get some sort of reception, and you really can't deny the installation. It's gonna be the same for this, where these facilities are gonna have to be installed to get the greater reception. So you're not gonna be able to deny installation if that's what if it's gonna be required for reception.
Well, for example, like the ones that we said no to on the roof of that building over by the, what is it?
Fairway.
On Hook Road. They could just come in and do that and say, sorry, go away.
Well, I mean, they can do it with limitations. I mean, there are several limitations in this zoning that they have to,
Or like, 10 years ago, RA considered the possibility of putting them on next to most of our amenities. Is that the kind of thing they could just come in and do without us being able to say no?
No, they can put poles on any public property, down any public street. They can put a 50-foot pole.
But it was RA property, is that public?
No.
No, but the streets all are, up to
The
the
streets
sidewalks
are.
all are.
But to the point of Hook Road, they could come in and we could deny it. There would have to be some sort of compromise reached with this board to make that happen.
yeah, I mean, you still can have overview on the aesthetic. There's a lot of guidelines in the zoning amendment in terms of size, location, and you can have lighting, you can have signs, and there's a lot of, it's nighttime reading, you can read it before you go to bed. There's a lot of restrictions as to what, you can and can't do.
But you're saying we need to have the standard in place, though, in order to do.
A guideline,
A guide-
you
yeah.
should have a guideline.
Because it appears that they've taken away a lot of restrictions in the revision to these.
I still don't understand. I guess I don't understand.
In the interest of improving cellular coverage, they have a
Cellular
quicker
coverage.
timeline to implement this.
And even there's some
Excuse me?
discussion about the small cell
Mhm.
that go in the public right of way, that could go on lights.
Right,
public
to-
right- I don't think we have oversight.
Yeah, down Lawyers Road, I think you see those a lot on telephone poles, that those would be.
Well, if it's not on private property or RA property, we already don't have oversight. But I don't see why we still don't have oversight on any covenanted property.
Do have oversight, but if it's an issue where this is the only way it can be done,
But how do you prove that?
I assume with an expert in science.
I don't believe,
You have to come in with someone who can say, this is literally the only way it can be done. And it's dissimilar from our friends over at Oak Road, because they didn't come in and say that this is the only way that this can be done. As a matter of fact, they came back and said the opposite. They said we can move it a little bit. Additionally, it only applies to structures that are 50 feet in height or less. So I don't think the Hook Road condo would fall under that.
How about that one over on, where Bear and Cameron, we keep talking about, they want to take that big dish thing and put something there, and they theoretically come along and put a huge tower there with all that stuff hanging off of it, with this revision.
These are just like a tin can on top of a pole by the way it reads.
So it's
Oh,
not tower,
like you see all up Georgetown Pike.
And they have
It's
a
not a cell
maximum
phone
height
tower.
that
We don't have any poles in Reston in the first place.
We
so
don't,
that-
but they can.
No, but they
I
can
think they
install them according to
Yes.
that.
Kathy Hutchins wants us to have more poles.
But, well,
Yeah.
I mean, this is
There you
technology
go,
we're
that's
going
what
to
she's
need.
trying
You see them in
Streetlights
Vienna
up
a
on
lot. If you go into
Yeah.
Vienna, you can see the.
Georgetown
little
Pike,
cans.
you see them too.
And they are noticeable.
Yeah.
Can we do a standard, has staff researched any of the standards at all?
We,
or-
we just got this.
We just got it, okay, so, I mean, even if it's just getting something on the record, so we can at least speak to compatibility or
Yeah.
something?
What's the deadline?
April 15th.
April 15th.
I don't
Well,
think
do
it has
we
to
need
be-
to have like a little, one of our
Focus
favorites,
groups.
a little subcommittee here to discuss this? I mean, is that, I think, it bears discussion.
I think that's an excellent idea, and we're ready to go to adopt it by March's meeting.
Right. Do I have any volunteers to be on a committee to read this, try to figure out
Can
what
plant
we
arborvitae in
can
front.
do? Anybody, raise your hands.
He
That's
just raised
good. All 9 of us, great.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Yeah, we need to have another one of our Friday work sessions or something to have.
I'll do all lunch. Wine and cheese, I'm good
I'll,
for it.
I'll,
May have to be a
All right,
Friday.
Neil has volunteered.
I'll volunteer.
There's Charlie. I'll volunteer. There's 3. We can get one more?
My travel's going to be really hairy. I can try, but I just know that I'm going to have some hairy stuff coming up. I know.
What Friday is it? Oh, no.
We don't have it set up. All right, Charlie, Neil, and me. Let's do it.
You guys are awesome.
And just keep it open
And
so that
Bruce
we know what
volunteers too.
day.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, well, I'm sure
Yeah, that
word will get
Friday
out.
would help.
We've also got a work session coming up in March, which I've got to send out again because it was too early last time I tried. But that's coming back, the RTCN thing.
Oh, goody.
So,
The what
yeah.
Who are they?
The
So I was probably gonna send it
Town Center
out
North thing, I think
later
is.
this
No,
week,
like, I'm tired of that.
but that's gonna be mid-March.
They want
It's
straight
Friday,
roads.
not,
We
they
can-
don't want the first.
I mean, just a suggestion, it doesn't have to be something that is, so overly done. If
It's
it's,
gonna be
I
8:15.
mean, I think this committee
I
could,
think they were okay with 8:15 and maybe 20, but I still check.
I mean, between the 4 of us, we could probably find a place we could meet for lunch and talk about this. It doesn't have to be here and scheduling rooms and all this stuff.
There's that too.
All right, so we now have a committee, we'll figure out how we're gonna do this.
It was the
And
fourth person.
hopefully get it done by, and hopefully we can get something done that we can get back to this board by the March meeting. That's kind of what we're saying, okay?
Good work.
So in the meantime, Anna sent this out to everybody, take a look at it.
Yeah, we appreciate comments.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and any comments you have, send to Anna and she'll distribute whatever.
What
Or
about
just do the reply all. And speaking of that, whenever you get a question of quorum,
Back on that.
everybody please reply all, so then we know.
Or at least copy
If you
Richard.
just answer Margot, well, it's just, we need to know, right? You don't just answer Margot and then no one else knows you're coming, right?
Lose sleep at
I thought it was so long ago we did and just nobody remembered. I mean, I don't
It
know
was
that I.
2 weeks
You
ago.
sure you're not remembering? Well, that was a long.
That's
time.
always possible. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so any comments you have, send to Margot or Anna, either one or both, and then we'll make sure everybody gets it, okay? In the meantime, the 4 of us will figure out when we get together. I mean, let's all take at least a week to go through this thing, so we have some idea what we're looking
What we're
at,
doing before we get
okay?
there.
And ask Anna questions. She seems to be the most conversant in this
Coming
particular
next time.
topic.
We're wireless tin cans.
Okay? All right, we will now entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.